Social studies. All right. Who can tell me, as a little review, what was the French and Indian War about? Why was it fought and who fought in it? The French and Indian War. Boy, the title in and of itself should tell you. The French and Indian War. Who fought the war? And why? Olivia.
The French and the Indians.
Right, and who else had a hand in it as well? Another country in Europe. M.
British?
Yes. Why were they fighting? What were they fighting for? What was very important to these folks at the time of this? They're trading, they're trying to make a profit. What is the big thing they're trading? Owen.
For, what? I forgot what I was going to say.
Christian.
For, bear fur?
For what?
Bear fur?
Oh, fur. I don't know exactly. I'm sure it was bear, other animals, but they traded their furs for money. And it was a big deal. And so the Indians and the French and the British were all fighting for land and for furs, and it didn't work out well. They started fighting, and then they got into a war. Who can tell me who won the war? Emmy. The Indians basically were fighting on both sides. But what European country ended up winning it? Emmy, or M.
British?
Yeah. So then that occurred, and the British sent a lot of money, they sent a lot of materials, there were forts to be built, there was ammunition, there were weapons, and the Americans were helping the British fight. They were doing most of the fighting. The British were doing most of sending the money and materials. And then when the British won, what did they turn around and do to the Americans or the colonists? What did they want the colonists to do that made the colonists angry? James.
Pay tax.
Yes. They basically wanted the colonists to pay the British back for everything that they gave them for the war. And this did not sit well with the colonists because they did most of the work and they didn't feel they needed to repay. So paying for the war created another problem. The British government spent much money on the war. They thought the colonists should pay taxes to help repay the cost. Britain said the taxes were fair because it fought to help the Americans, but the Americans did not think the taxes were fair. First, the Americans had done most of the fighting and fort building. Second, the Americans did not elect lawmakers to the British government. If Americans had to pay taxes, they should be part of making the laws. What is a law? What are they referring to? That they should be part of making the laws. Owen.
What people should do.
Should or should not do, right? Laws are basically written out statements of things you can and can't do. Who is writing all the laws for the colonists? Who wrote the laws? Wensheen?
The British king.
Yes, the British. The king and the British Parliament. Well, they didn't have a parliament back then. But the British. And the king at that time had a lot of power, correct? And so that did not sit well with the colonists. Why are they leaving England? What are they wanting? What are they seeking? What are they striving for? To continue to be British colonists or British citizens, or what do they want? See if this will stick. So it's a moving map. So they're leaving Europe and they're coming here. Why are they leaving Europe? What is the main reason that started? Why did they leave? What are some of the main things they left for? Helen?
For fur.
Well, initially they didn't know about the fur, but they're for trading, right? Yes. Grayson? Initially, why did the colonists come over to here? What was going on in Europe that they weren't happy with?
The British king was giving them all orders, and they didn't want them to give them orders.
Right. The king was telling them what to do. What was one thing the king was telling them how to do and how to worship and how to do this and how to do that? And they didn't like that. They wanted religious what? M. Yes. The king was even telling them how they should worship, how they worship God, what they should and shouldn't do, and the colonists were done with that. So they came over, and they started making colonies and starting having a lot of success. And the British didn't like that. So the British continued to tax them and to make things difficult because the king, wanted control. And so North America has lots of raw materials, meaning what? What is a raw material? What is a raw material? Jeremiah.
Something straight from the stores.
From the what?
Stores.
Not the stores. Source. Okay. Right. So meaning what? From what is the source that they were using or getting all of their materials from in North America? Like what is a raw material that you can name? Fish. What did they have not a lot of in England that they wanted to come to North America for? M. Land. So trees, raw materials were trees. What are we just talking about in the French and Indian War? What were they trading and fighting over? That's a raw material. Christian. Fur. So they have a lot of raw material. Europe does not. But Europe has more of the luxury items that you can buy at a store. Furniture, china, clothing, things that make our lives a little simpler and nicer. They have all of that in abundance in Europe, whereas they do not in the colonies. So they would trade raw materials, luxury items, a lot of trading, furs. So a lot of trading going on. However, the friction continues to build because the king will not relent. He wants more and more power and more control. And so he starts taxing and taxing and taxing. And the Americans get angrier and angrier. What does it mean to want independence? We talked about this last week. What does independence mean? If you were a colonist and you were being taxed and told what to do in Europe, what does it mean if you wanted independence from the king, most specifically? Grayson.
Like you want to do things by yourself.
You want to do things by yourself? Can we expand on that? We want independence. We want to do things on our own, which is a big one. What else, Winsheen?
If you want to do something, nobody cares what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not necessary. I mean, kind of. I mean, people care. You want people to care, but they don't want the king to care so much, right? Right. Tyson.
They want to be able to get off of the king's hand.
Yes. The king's hand is very long. It reaches all the way across the Atlantic Ocean.
No.
Well, it kind of does because he has all of this control. And he is telling them what to do. And he sends ships of soldiers over here to try to tell them what to do and to force it. So do you think that the colonists are getting angrier? Yes, they are. And they want independence. They want to be separate entity from Europe. So on 24 of your textbook, we have the Revolutionary War. And the Revolutionary War is basically the colonists saying we've had enough, and they go to war against Europe. Who do you think has the bigger military, has the more ammunition, has the fancier equipment? The colonists or Europe? James?
Europe.
Absolutely. By a lot. They have been established for hundreds of years, whereas these guys, the colonists, have been maybe a few years. But one thing the colonists has is determination. And they also have a lot of smarts. They didn't just go out and fight, they had a plan, and it was a really good plan. And they had people who were very, very determined to make the plan work. Yes, Helen?
I know what
Well, we're not. So that is the Revolutionary War, friends, is the war against the British. So is everyone on page 24 of their textbooks? 24. Put your books on your desk. Sit up and listen. Focus. So the people in the colonies wanted government to work a certain way. And they no longer wanted a king. The king is the only ruler in England. A king. And the French had a different king or queen. The monarchy ruled everything, and the people had nothing to say. The colonists did not like that. They wanted a government that the people had a say, that the people had freedoms, and there were laws that were just and fair for all. And so the colonists were very wise people. They had a lot of wise people that lived in the colonies that started forming the ideas of how this government would look like, or how it would look and how it would work, and how the people would function in this kind of government. And guess what, folks? It is our government that we still have today. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So the colonists back in the Revolutionary days, in 1774, think about that, framed the Constitution, framed the government that we still have today. So let's read about that. The American leaders thought carefully about how government should work. They believed people should not rebel against it, but when a government mistreated the people, instead of protecting them, it rebelled against God's laws. Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean to be mistreated? They're saying the government mistreated the people. Who is the government that is mistreating the people? The colonists or the European king? Owen. Because technically they don't really have a government yet. They're forming the government. So they're forming this government, Tyson.
The European.
Yeah, the king. They are being mistreated. They feel like they're not being heard. They're not being represented. And so they want to change that. And so many Americans felt that the British government was mistreating them and made them pay taxes. What is taxes again?
Extra money from something?
Yeah, it's extra money, yes. Do we have to pay taxes now?
Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, friends. Someday you too will get to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so exciting. It's just something to look forward to.
I don't want
All right, okay, Star. I know it's close to the end of the day, but we still have got to focus. This is all very exciting stuff because it still exists today. So, what is a representative? This is what they really believed in. The Americans wanted to choose American leaders who would help make the laws. These leaders would be a representative to the colonies, and then be a representative to Britain. So what is a representative? If you look in the 24, there is a bold word. Everybody focus on 24 and look for the bold word. Gabe. Yep, is what? Read that, please. A representative
is someone who people choose to act or speak for them.
There you go. So if you think about our times today, we just went through a huge election to decide who is going to represent us. We have two branches of government, the Republican branch and the Democrats. Well, they're not branches of government. They're two forms of government, two parts of the government. And we, what? How do they get into power? Do they choose to become our representative, or how do they become a representative for us? Who chooses who is in either our House of Representatives, our presidency, our Senate? Who chooses? Toby. Yes. They are voted in. So the people in America didn't have that privilege yet. They had no say. So this is what they are starting to form. They want someone, a representative, to speak for them, so that that person would go over to England and be a person that would speak on behalf of the Americans. Because right now, no one is speaking for them in Europe, and Europe is saying everything and deciding everything. So it's very one-sided. And they don't like that. Who would? So what do you think happens?
War.
Yeah. So nothing is being done. The Americans did not like the British soldiers. They were in American cities and homes. The soldiers were there to make sure the Americans obeyed the British government. So the king was sending soldiers over here. The soldiers were telling the colonists what they can and can't do. This is what the king says, and they are saying, we don't care. This isn't fair anymore. We don't want this anymore. So yes, a war does. They did petition. They did not get help. The king said that the colonists must obey. Near the city of Boston, colonists gathered guns. If the king sent an army, there might be a war. The British general told his soldiers to take the colonist guns away. He sent soldiers to arrest the colonist leaders. The British soldiers wanted to surprise the colonists, but Paul Revere, the British are coming, warned the British that the British were coming. And the Americans met the British soldiers at Lexington in Concord, Massachusetts. No one knows which side fired first, but the Revolutionary War began. And guess who our general was, who commanded the Continental Army? Tyson.
Thomas Jefferson.
Nope. He's a great guy, but not the right one. Grayson.
George Washington.
Yes, George Washington. In your picture, that is George Washington on the horse. Okay, so on page 26 we have a map that shows the battles. The American victories are in green. There's no green. In blue, and the British are in red. By looking at that, who would you say won the war? Grayson.
British?
Yeah. There appears to be more red, right? But at first the British had great success. But the colonists did not give up. They defeated the British in many battles. The Americans finally won the war at the Battle of Yorktown in 1783. So the war started in 1774 and didn't end until 1783.
Wow.
Was that a short battle? No. So, the Americans and the British signed a peace treaty. What is a treaty? Who can tell me what a treaty is? Helen.
Like an agreement?
Yes. So if it is a treaty dealing with a war called a peace treaty, what do you think they are agreeing to stop doing? James. Yes. Indeed. The Revolutionary War brought many changes. The most important change was America's independence. So we are now, oh my goodness, we've migrated all the way down. We are now free and independent from Europe, or from England. And so now is the rebuilding process. Now things really start to work as far as our government. Because just because they won the war, they still have a lot to do. Who has ever heard of the Constitution? The U.S. Constitution. That is what we're going to learn about. If you turn the page, it says the Constitution. But we have to have a little test before that. But the Constitution, friends, is again what makes this country unique. We are represented by people. The people have a say. We elect our officials. We are a free country. And our founding fathers, who fought for us in this Revolutionary War, created an amazing government that we have the privilege to live in and be free in. Yes, Em?
When will we be talking about the Boston Tea Party?
Well, they don't really talk about it, but the Boston Tea Party is very fun. So that when they are talking about the battle, I'm trying to find that. That was over here. That was basically the culmination of why everything kind of blew up. When they were talking about, I'm trying to find where I read that, about Boston. Here we go. On page 25, the petition did not help. The king said that the colonists must obey. Near the city of Boston, colonists gathered guns. If the king sent an army, there might be a war. They also dumped a bunch of tea in the Boston and the Boston Tea Party. I was kind of hoping they'd talk about it, but they do not. Maybe we can talk about it tomorrow. I'll look up some more research. Yes,
My brother, sometimes says there's a bunch of people in Boston that had a tea party.
The Boston Tea Party was basically the British sent over, they're sending over materials to America. They sent, the British liked their tea, as did the colonists. Tea was very important. So the colonists dumped a bunch of tea in the Boston Harbor. And then because they were going to be taxed at higher levels, and they said no, and so they dumped the tea. They like their tea, but they like their independence more.
What if their tea just like
The tea probably,
or some bread?
the bay may have tasted delicious for a while.
What if the bay was hot water?
Then it would be delicious. So that kind of was the culmination of the beginning of all of it. So I love tea. So it's an acquired taste. You're all a little young. Star. I want you, we have time left, you are going to work on page 13 of your manual. It says independence. Use your book. It is about what we just talked about. Let's do number 1 together, and then I want you to try to do some of this on your own. What was the leaders who people chose to act to speak for them? Remember we talked about that word. What was the word? Colonists or representatives? People who speak for you. Tessa? Representatives. So you are going to use pages 24 through 27 to answer these questions. So please work on this now and try to get this done. I'm going to give you time. Right, we are just going to have time to work.